Where's Phil? Come on, Phil.
I'm coming.
All right. Great stuff. Thank you very much,
Sorry I
Jen.
went so far over.
No, that's good. Did you like that, Stephen?
I did.
I thought you might.
That was nice.
Let's do it.
I felt little smiles from you.
Yeah, see? It's great. In fact, I mean, I kind of get the feeling that maybe designers and maybe developers as well have internalized all of the stuff you can't do. Oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. Browsers can't do it. And actually, if you go and check, you'd be surprised. And maybe designers are even self-censoring, thinking, oh, I better not do this particular technique because I remember my developer giving out to me saying, oh, that's not possible. So, I mean, Phil, is it now your job to evangelize to designers, not what they can't do, but what they can do?
I think that's completely fair, actually. And as you were talking, first of all, I was thinking I wish I'd spoken to Steve beforehand and said the answer is quantum CSS, because we all can do and can't do at the same time. That would have blown his mind. But I remember when I joined the agency where Steve and I worked together, I was kind of heading up the front-end development there, and I had a very different viewpoint to what I have now, and it kind of talks to your point that I used to think, well, I need to share with the design team what the parameters are that we can work within and what's achievable in the timeframes, what's realistic and what's not, and that can obviously get seen as pushing back and saying, oh no, we can't do that, that's too hard. A year or two later, when some more developers joined who frankly were better than me, they kind of said, okay, I dare you. Come up with a design that we can't implement, which is much better, and I think you had a much better time at that point. But I think you're right. It's for us to evangelize around what is possible. I think there are obviously still going to be constraints, and we need to know where the edges are. But and they're moving all the time, and that's why it's frustrating because now I know the rules that we have to design within, and we get used to that, and then we say, actually, but now we can do this. But that should be a big enabler rather than a frustration, I hope.
Conversely, Stephen, when you're saying, nostalgia for the good old days before responsive design came along, when things were simpler and you could do the 1024 layers, whatever. You may have been happier, but weren't you living a lie? I mean, would you rather take the red pill or the blue pill? Would you rather face the uncomfortable reality that things are messy and there's all sorts of screen sizes? Or would you actually prefer to just go, la la la, I don't hear this, I'm just going to design a fixed width layout? That's
the difficult thing, because as I said, it's a head and a heart issue for me. So there's parts of it which, I find, generally speaking, despite my rhetoric, the web is a lot better now than it was back then. But there's part of me, I'm an illustrator as well, so part of me is very much just back, because I want to draw whatever I possibly can. And therefore, that part of that also plays back into the professional side of what I do. So a lot of this pragmatism and all that sort of thing in terms of these are things I need to work to, but a part of it is just, oh God, it would be really nice if it was really awesome and shiny and cool and did this sort of things. And you're trying to balance those two parts of your personality a little bit within this job. And the whole part of that just didn't exist 10 years ago. So when it suddenly started coming along, I just didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it existed.
It existed, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So, I mean, essentially I worked in Flash. I used Flash a lot back 10 years ago. But I tell you why I use Flash. I'm not particularly good at coding. I will hold my hands, I'm not very good at coding. I have very limited amounts still of ActionScript 2 left in my head from my Flash days. And, but one of the things I loved about Flash for me was that I could control my environment completely.
Control, see, that's what it comes down to.
It comes down to control. And that was one of the things that we were going to talk about in the talk, but we didn't get time to. So,
but what if it was always just the illusion of control? The
illusion of control. But the control that it gives me is it gives me the control to completely set how my environment looks. So I know how my type rules work, and I know how my animations work, and I know how all these sorts of things in experience works. And I don't have to sit next to some guy who's like, well, I don't know, does it move like that? Like, no, it kind of, easing properties is a bit more like that, and it takes about that sort of, does it like that? No, it's still not like that. Just let me do it, I'll do it.
It's really hard to get an opinion out of Steve, is the problem.
How did you react when Jen said designing in the browser?
But I really wish I could design in a browser. I really, really wish I could. My brain, it just doesn't work that way. I have tried, but I can't work within that way. I think I sort of refer to, I have like pencil shavings and paint splodges in my head. And when I try and think about code...
You could learn Flash, come on.
I didn't learn Flash. I learned putting stuff on a timeline. So that's a visual thing. I want this thing to start here and I want it to end there. And I know enough about GreenSock.js that I can
I
apply
should
things.
say that there are tools coming, because there are people. I was just meeting with somebody from Adobe yesterday who's like, they know that's a problem, and there are people who want to solve that problem.
And tools and like frameworks for that is a difficult problem to solve, right? And I know that we've been hungry for that for a while. But when you say designing in the browser, are you because I'm a big fan of that as well, but are you suggesting that designers should be able to write code? Because it seems like that's what Jeremy, you
I
were
just wanted to
tiptoeing
know
around
what
then.
Stephen's reaction was to that phrase, whether like he was in pain.
Longing. It's longing. If I could cut you all out of the design process, I would.
In fact, we're not even going to go there today, because we don't even have time to delve into that.
But I think people working together to design in the browser is great. I mean, I think it's great when you've got a front-end developer and you've got a designer doing exactly what you described, working together in a browser. Great things can happen.
Yeah. Adam, I want to bring something, this kind of relates to something that Stephen was talking about, you know, at the end of the day, pragmatism, reality, and money came up, right? Moolah, and how some things just got to get cut. It can be dangerous when it comes to certain things. I mean, if you were to just look at the bottom line, you'd have a very good use case for not dealing with accessibility, for example, because the numbers don't justify it. Is it possible that, in fact, progressive enhancement as a phrase is harmful because it makes it sound like exactly what you were railing against, Stephen, like, oh, design is just making things pretty, design is sugarcoating. And progressive enhancement makes it sound like it's an added extra, right, that we could cut from as a line item on the budget, rather than something core. So is there this difference in how you approach it in terms of building up rather than adding on?
I think most of the things that we do, even without JavaScript, can be considered enhancements, and those are all very much essential to the core experience. So a little bit like Stu was saying. So yeah, I just think if we deliver little and often, like I said in my talk, then I think we can be sure that those enhancements are adding value. And then that's a good way to keep costs down and keep momentum going.
So you justify every enhancement?
I think it's a lot easier that way.
Yeah. Jen, go back to the whole IE thing. I sense your frustration, you know, developers saying this. There does seem to be some kind of weird Stockholm syndrome with IEs. Like you said, you showed them numbers of Opera Mini, like, oh, Opera Mini, we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, you see numbers, you're like, okay, what % of that version of IE is it? Like 0.02. Well, how many people are using your website with a screen reader? 4%. Oh, we don't care about those people. There aren't enough of them. Like, what? Like, yeah. I don't understand it. And I don't care about other old versions of IE, but I know that a lot of people do, and so I address that feeling because it's so common.
Well, now we've got a toolkit of tools we can use to have our cake and eat it too. Okay, I'm going to throw this open to questions. Can I get a show of hands from everybody who has a question again? So put your hand up if you have a question. I just want to get a feel. Really? We've only got to have one person? We've got two, okay. Really, no more? If you have any questions at all, I just want to get a... Maybe another one over there. Which one? Okay, yeah. Okay, good. Just want to get a gauge. All right, yes?
What about design for internationalization, for multi-language, basically?
Multi-language design?
Yeah, what would you use? Because in my company, we have the website is very popular and is used by Russia, Germany, and their language is very long compared to English or Italian, whatever.
A bit off topic, but sure, internationalization.
I mean, I could say one thing about Flexbox and Grid, and there's actually another spec called the alignment spec, there is no left and right anymore in CSS. It's all like start and end because there's a recognition that some languages go from left to right and some go from right to left and some go vertically. And so there is built into the technology now a way in which you just sort of do your whole layout and then you can in one line flip it another direction.
I think Anna was tweeting about that just the other day, how Flexbox is really powerful.
Which, by the way, makes it harder to learn Flexbox alignment and grid. And so when you're sitting there going, why didn't they just use left and right? Why do I start and I don't know. This is why. Internationalization, it's a big world. I think a lot of the answer to your question, though, has a lot more to do with server-side CMS, content management systems, and organizing everything. And progressive enhancement as a philosophy, I think, applies, figuring out a way that you're not overly making one language more important than the other, and then it's going to work all the time, but it's not really about JavaScript or CSS or HTML. It's really about content management and content strategy.
Yeah. Hang on, Paul. We had David over there in the corner. If we could get a microphone. You didn't put your hand up when I asked. I know. Well, putting a gap.
Hi, thanks. Steve, I'm not sure how polemical you were being at the time. You said 10 years ago, a client gave you 50 grand and you had 10 pages to build, whereas these days they'll give you the same money with the same expectation. But obviously these days, designing and building that stuff is a whole lot more complicated. But it seems that there's kind of an iceberg problem there where they can still see the same 10% above the waterline that they've always seen if their CEOs signing off on their desktop monitors. How do we communicate to the client that there's so much more going on, and it costs more to do it because it needs a lot more time and expertise than it did before?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that, because generally speaking what happens is you say to them, this is way more complex than that now and it's going to cost an awful lot of money, and they say, how much more money? And you say, X figure, and they go, okay, great, there's a place down the road that will do it for 50 grand, so bye. You're just like, okay, you didn't really give me an awful lot of chance to really sell that one. It's a really, really difficult problem. It's managing expectations. And I don't know if there's a sea change that needs to happen on the client side that comes and fills that, but at the moment I don't know how to answer it beyond just trying to undercut another design agency.
I mean, this comes back to the very first question of the day, wasn't it? How do I convince? And you must get this too with the IE question. Like, everyone in this room is probably, supporting IE8, can mean just giving them the plain styles. But my boss, now that's another story, right? Or my client, how do I convince ... That's tougher, right? And really, the people in this room are not really the people we need to be talking to. Right?
Well, and I think that it's, how do you convince a client who might be ignorant how to make a great website, how to have great user experience, how to think about their business strategy more clearly? Like, it always depends. It's always different for every single situation, and I feel like this is just no different. And even in making this presentation, I'm like, let me just come up with the ultimate layout in grid. Let me come up with the solution to this one. And I'm like, yeah, there aren't any. There's not one ultimate. I mean, that's what we got with like Bootstrap. We had like one ultimate kit with all the solutions baked in. And I think we need to let go of that desperation and that sense of like, I just need to read the one blog post that has all the answers and then I'll be set. Like, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it is kind of the same thing, isn't it? That drives us to material design and Bootstrap.
We start using the systems that we already know work before, so we just...
Exactly.
Like, how do you convince a client to have their own brand and not just to like evangelize Google's brand?
Yeah,
like,
exactly, yeah.
Especially when brands often see something that they really like. I mean, we often, with the agency where I work, we often get a lot of briefs where the conversation quickly turns to, oh, here's a load of examples of things that we really want to emulate. And a few of them I've seen on the screen today when it comes to, like, and I think in your talk, with lots of like rich animations and like janky scrolling, and you quickly get into the situation where you've got to do a lot of education and you have to get there quickly.
or you
it's
just
tough.
let those clients go. You just say, good luck,
Yeah.
and you go get good ones.
Send them to Steve's place.
We had a question. Yes, okay, you did decide to ask it.
I just wanted to ask, it's a bit simplistic perhaps, but to you, Adam, and everybody else, the one universal thing with all this is URLs, and someone was saying a couple of weeks ago on Twitter something about how not enough consideration is given for designing good URLs, and I think everyone should agree that's,
Yes. I'm a URL fetishist, but
there
yes,
you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think we could all get behind
agree.
that. There's a great article by Ross Penman called Let Links Be Links on a list apart. It's fantastic. And basically it goes to that, URLs, starting with URLs, goes to a lot of what Stefan was talking about, a lot of getting back to, going with the web rather than battling against it. And you're a bit of a fan of...
I am, yeah. I love a URL.
Good link.
I do.
Yeah.
And it always frustrates me if I'm involved in a project and there's information architecture happening and a whole, like, wireframes being produced.
Yeah.
If there isn't a URL on a wireframe, it makes me crazy, because we need to know what the relationships are and what the hierarchies are, and I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm going to move.
But I mean, you're exactly right. Simplicity, right? I mean, it doesn't get much more simple
Absolutely.
than the URLs, and yet ignored so often.
Yep.
But critically, that's not at the expense of the other things,
Right,
right?
right. It's
I
just
mean,
where you
that's, so it should, like, Steve and I shouldn't be having a tug of war over whether or not things look beautiful and transition nicely between one state to another, and if it's going to have nice URLs. We can have both.
Well, I think that's a common theme throughout the day, that there's been maybe this false dichotomy between you can either have something or you can have this something else. You can either have progressive enhancement or you have the shiny thing.
It's not
Whereas,
true.
right, what we keep hearing is that you can have it both. I mean, you crystallized it, but over and over again, server-side rendering, client-side rendering,
Yeah, it's really great what Jen's has presented, because I mean I'm normally that guy that says no too much, and then I'm that guy. Sorry, but actually in my recent job, the design has been pushing for certain layouts, much like Jen's been talking about, and that's forced me to use Flexbox, and that's been great because it's a natural progressive enhancement. A couple of lines, great.
Yeah. It's
So
also
I think
wonderful
we need
to
to
see
work together a little bit more.
the progressive enhancement isn't just about JavaScript. It really drove it home,
Yeah.
right? It's not just about JavaScript. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. We did have one more question over here. If we could just get the microphone. Maybe run a little bit over. But yeah, if you could hold your hand up there. There we go.
This one's for Adam. In embracing simplicity, was that something that was natural to you and something you always did, or was it a decision, a conscious decision after a world of complexity?
A bit of both. So I think I've always been that way, but I've also built single-page applications. You saw that single-page checkout, but single-page applications really started hitting that point home when everyone in the industry was doing single-page checkouts, and I was doing it too. I was like, oh, I gotta get out. My CV is going to be the bomb. I'm going to get my rate up. It's going to be amazing. And I did that, and after a while, I just ended up just solving all these problems that were already solved by the browser already. And I was like, I'm not adding value here. It's good that I got that experience for myself, but it wasn't good for the users or the business. They paid a lot of money for something that was just like, I reinvented routing on the client, and that started to hit the point home. And the more and more I had conversations with people of the same mindset, it gave me confidence to sort of come out and speak about doing the simple things. And then I actually also came across A/B tests where the simple thing won out. And it was those things that really did it.
Yeah, data.
Paul, did you actually want a question, or are you okay? Okay. All right, good, because we're over time as it is.
The question.
Yeah, we're going to take the final break of the day. I think just 15 minutes. We can afford it. Yeah, we can run a little bit over today. So go get some coffee, get some tea. But before you do, how about a round of applause for Adam and Stephen and Phil and Jen?